Welcome to the Watchdog Report. I'm Mary Williams, your host, and our guest today is Alan Stang. And before I introduce Alan, I want to read just the highlights of his unbelievable resume. So, bear with me, I'll make this fast. He's been a journalist, an investigator, a magazine editor, a ghostwriter, a lecturer, an author, a nationally syndicated news commentator, a foreign correspondent for The Voice of America, a radio talk show host for almost half a century. Alan was one of Mike Wallace's, of 60 Minute fame's, original writers. His Los Angeles radio show went head-to-head with Larry King, and according to the Orbitron, he had almost twice as many listeners. He has written hundreds of featured magazine articles in national magazines and some 15 books, for which he has won many awards. One of his exposés stopped a criminal attempt to seize the control of New Mexico, where a gang seized a courthouse, held a judge hostage, and killed a deputy. The scheme was close to success before he intervened. Alan Stang has lectured in every state around the nation and around the world, and has guested on many top shows, including CNN's Crossfire. His first novel, The Highest Virtue, set in the Russian Revolution, won smashing reviews, and his first book, It's Very Simple, The True Story of Civil Rights, was an instant bestseller. And I might add that one of the best things he's done is married a wonderful Houstonian by the name of Gail, and they raised 6 children. Alan, welcome to the show. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, Mary. Good to be with you.
The Watchdog Report is starting a series on various subjects on the reality versus the myth. And I knew when I read your January 19th article on Martin Luther King, which was brilliant and I might say very politically incorrect, I knew I had to have you on. We had to talk about this.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And you're a brave man to touch such a sacrosanct subject, such as the legacy. But I want people to understand, in no way do you say that there weren't legitimate grievances about the civil rights era that needed to be addressed. What we're talking about here is the person of Martin Luther King, MLK.
Exactly.
Okay, so we'll just start in, because there's so much meat here. We'll have a hard time getting this in this hour. All right, now, the premise of your article, which is entitled, if I remember right, Uncelebrate King 2009, is that there are 5 reasons that you say disqualifies MLK from rating a national holiday.
Well, that's true, Mary, but I think before we even get to those 5 points, there are a couple of things, generic points, maybe you could call them, that we need to discuss, and that is, remember, first of all, you're talking about making a national holiday for a man about whom most of the records have been sequestered by a court order at the request of his wife. Usually, the way you think a national holiday would arise is that after a man's death, his reputation would percolate for a while, would mature through the minds of the people, through the country, and after a while a spontaneous desire would arise in the minds of the people. Let's honor this man with a national holiday. And of course, Washington immediately comes to mind. Exactly. George Washington, the father of our country, Washington's Day. All right. Here, you've got a case in which, almost as in an emergency, it was, if you remember that time when they were trying to put this through, it was almost an emergency. The world will collapse if we don't immediately make a national holiday for this man before everything is known about him.
4 days after he died, I think John Conyers offered the bill in the House of Representatives. Isn't that correct?
I can't recall, but it was.
I believe that's what my research said.
And on top of that, you've got most of the records pertaining to him sequestered by court order. We're not allowed to know about this man,
right,
for whom we're doing a holiday.
And if I remember right, in the research I was reading last night, she specifically said because this will ruin his reputation. I mean, she was very honest about it. And of course, being his wife, you can be sympathetic.
Well, of course you can. But also, there's another point. Remember that You're making a national holiday here for a man, and you're honoring this man above every other American, including Washington, because we used to have Washington's birthday. Well, now we have President's Day. Washington's birthday subsumed in President's Day. There is only one American for whom we have a national holiday, and that is this man King. So he is being honored above Washington. So what I would submit before we even get to the 5 classifications, categories you're talking about is does it make sense to honor any man? Forget about who he is, any man above Washington?
Well, no, not to me it doesn't. And I remember a congressman made this point, the various congressmen. It took 15 years for this to finally come about, if I understand. It happened in 83 under the Reagan administration.
Yes.
Okay, so there was quite a bit of debate along those lines. And if I remember also there was debate about the nation just simply couldn't afford another paid holiday.
Yes.
But anyway, yes, point well taken. All right, well, let's start with your first point as to why you say he should be disqualified, and that is his Communist Party activities.
Well, yes, if first of all, if you take a look at my book, it's very simple, The True Story of Civil Rights. I see you've got a battered copy there that has been through the washing machine.
True. Excellent book.
If you take a look there, you will find a tremendous amount of the communist activities that Martin King participated in. But the amazing thing about this particular subject is, after the book was published, we discovered more about his communist activities than I had known when I wrote the book. I had to write many magazine articles after the book to catch up with all of the things that we discovered later.
Well, there's one quote that you put in your article that was so riveting. If I may, I just want to quote your article here. You talk about Bayard Rustin, if I pronounce his name right, and he was King's secretary.
Yes.
MLK secretary. And you say here, he spent his entire life in the Communist Party activities, and who demanded that, quote, more bloody Negro suffering should be encouraged so that squeamish northern Negroes would be horrified into line, end quote.
This is standard communist procedure. Terrify, terrorize, intimidate, victimize, kill, if necessary, the people you purport to be liberating in order to persuade them to keep their heads down, keep their mouths shut, do not protest, so that you can create the phony impression of a mass movement of people marching as one. And so that's what Bayard Rustin was talking about. That's standard communist procedure.
But how many people do you think know this? I mean,
not enough.
We have canonized MLK.
Yes.
And of course he wants, and he's famous for saying we should judge, he wants, if I quote, his 4 little children to be judged by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin. And I totally agree with that, and I'm sure you do too. And of course now we're here looking at the